We are live with Preethi Kasireddy, who is a software engineer who previously worked as a venture capitalist at Andreessen Horowitz. And she is going to tell us all about her transition from finance into software engineering. Welcome, Preethi.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Oh my God. So where do I start? So I did write a Medium post about this about exactly a year and a half ago, because that's when it happened. I was a partner at Andreessen Horowitz, so my job was to meet with entrepreneurs every day and learn about what they're building, and then see if it was a good investment for Andreessen Horowitz to make. And it was such an amazing job because you learn from all these entrepreneurs and you learn some of the problems they're solving, how they're solving it technically, socially, politically, etc. And so it was a very mentally stimulating job, obviously. And as I was meeting more and more of these entrepreneurs, though, I finally realized that, hey, actually, this is what I want to do long term. Like, I want to go and build something really important for this world. And I had the entrepreneur bug. And the one skill set that I felt like I was missing, though, was knowing how to build my own product from ground up. This is something I really value. When a founder, I really value people who can build the product from ground up, because you can really envision the product in a much holistic way rather than like outsourcing it typically. And if I was going to build a startup, I want to be like a core part of a core, uh, the one of the core foundational developers on the team. So then I was like, okay, so I don't know how to code, and so I was like trying to learn how to code, and I started with like Python. I used like the book Learn Python the Hard Way, and it was just too much to do while I had a full-time job. So I ended up getting through 6 weeks of it, and then I just like dropped it slowly. Then I was like, okay, maybe I need something more structured. So I joined like an online course, a paid online course, like something like lynda.com type stuff.
Mhm.
Um, and it went well for the first 4 weeks again, and then work took over, and then other priorities took over, and I just like kind of fell off. This kind of cycle went about like 3 or 4 separate times, and each time I was trying something new to see like if anything would click. Nothing really clicked. I realized, like I was really good at science and math in college. So maybe I should do like more on the data science route. So I took a data science course. Um, that went really well. I actually finished it, but then I didn't know what to do with that. I was like,
Awesome.
okay, I'm
Awesome.
done.
Which course, by
And
the way?
it was on Thinkful, and
Mhm.
Thinkful has a really cool model where you pay a lot more, but you get a mentor that you can talk to once a week, and that really was like such a key part of learning, because you inevitably get stuck when you're learning how to code. That's all you're doing when you're first learning. You're always getting stuck, always frustrated. And so it was nice to have like that saving grace at the end of the week, be like, here's everything I got stuck on, like I really need help. Whereas like if you're alone, sometimes it can be very daunting, and that's why you don't even want to come back to it. um, so then I realized there was something key there with the mentor, but I didn't really want to do data science. So then my boyfriend was like, why don't you try JavaScript? It runs everywhere, and it's like you can use it anywhere, and it's so much easier. I don't know why you're learning Python. And I was like, I don't know, because I thought it was a good language. And so I tried JavaScript. I remember I stayed home from work that day, and I just went through 10 hours on Coursera, on I think it was Coursera or one of those, Code Academy. Um, Spent 10 hours just going through the JavaScript course, and I like fell in love. Like that's when I was like, oh my God, this clicked. And I was like, ever since that day, I just started doing more and more and more incrementally every day. And after 3 months, I had already built like my first like website, my first web application. And this is all just following tutorials like Treehouse or Code Academy or like Egghead.io, like all these different online things. I was just like following along and learning as I go. And at some point at work, I was actually starting to find myself coding at work too. And like my boss one time walked past me. He's like, "What are you doing there? Why do you have an editor open? Shouldn't you be meeting with entrepreneurs?" And I was like, and that's when I realized like I'm really into this. And at some point, I loved it so much that I was like, I want to make this my day job. I don't want to have to rush home at night and like just spend like 2-3 hours on this every night. I want to do this like full time, because I've always been someone who like if I like something, I'll do it 100%. I can't really like do half that, half this. I have a hard time like multitasking, and so I want to just go all in. And I was like, I'm very impatient too. I wanted to know this everything I can like right away. And so I could have definitely a lot of my friends were like, just, slowly learn, take like a year or two, take your time. Don't do those stupid boot camps. Like they're a waste of time. They're a waste of money. You can learn this on your own. And I was like, I listened to 1 year and let it go out the other year because I knew I wanted this as fast as I can. So I started to like really take it seriously, study a lot. I applied to one of the boot camps I got in, and because I was able to afford it, I ended up going and just spending the 3 months there and just like basically dedicating my whole life to this whole transition. And I got out of it, and it was like probably the best decision I made ever. And I came out with a skill set that I didn't have before and that I really, really wanted. And I got it faster than I expected. And I was learning at a rate that I was like pretty shocked. I was like shocked at my own self at like how fast I was learning this. And it was merely because I just like loved it. And it was just like I would devour this stuff. So that happened. And then that was about exactly a year ago was when I graduated Hack Reactor. And then I spent a few months actually just hacking on my own. I worked with a very well-known open source author on a side project. I worked on my own side project. I kind of wanted like a few months for the things I learned in Hack Reactor to sink in and for me to explore my own technical interests before I go and get a job. And so I did that for a few months, and then I went to go work at Coinbase for a bit. So that's kind of my transition.
Awesome. And along the way, you wrote a lot. Like you wrote a lot of great articles about Docker, about how JavaScript modules work, about how the web works, HTTP, and REST. What inspired you to take all these things you were learning and channel them into these articles and share them with the greater developer community and the community of people who are learning to code?
Yeah, sure. So one of the things I did before going to Hack Reactor was talk to like a bunch of people that went through boot camps and ask them what advice they'd give me. And they're like, one thing you should do is write because it helps you learn too. And I was just like, okay, so maybe I'll try this whole writing thing. And I remember I wrote my first article, and it went really well. Like the reception was really well, and people kept telling me, wow, like you have a way of teaching that I really enjoy. You have a way of explaining concepts that is very easy to understand. And so I realized that I had something there. So I was like, why not just do this? I'll continue to write. People seem to be getting value out of it, and I get value out of it too, because I learned this topic much better if I have to write about it. So that's kind of how it started. And then over time, honestly, I just became obsessed with writing. Like I never thought I'd like writing. I like hated writing in school. I hated even like writing fancy emails. I used to hate writing emails. And now I enjoy writing. I read books on writing. I read techniques on writing. And it's
Any
something
books you'd recommend?
yeah, uh, on writing well is probably the best book ever. And so right now it's because it started because people just told me like, oh, writing is a good way to learn. But now it's because I'm finding that I love teaching. And so this is my way of giving back to the community and helping other people get up to speed, people who are struggling maybe, or people who just don't understand certain topics that I had a hard time with. And two, because I just genuinely enjoy writing and I want to continue to become a better writer.
And on the subject of teaching, you are teaching a new course on functional programming.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, how did that come about, and what inspired you to create an entire course just specific to functional programming of all things?
Yeah, sure. In terms of creating a course, I've always wanted to try it. All my blog posts have just been like random topics that I've learned and that I wanted to share with the world. But I want to see if I can create a cohesive course that lasts for a long time. And so that's the reason I did the course approach instead of a blog. And I made it free. And the reason I chose functional programming is because I think this is an interesting time in the front end where we kind of started going functional about like 6-7 years ago, but then we drifted into this OO world, object-oriented world in the front end. So like Backbone, Ruby on Rails, the original Angular, jQuery, like it was very object-oriented. And I think people are starting to realize that with the whole advent of React, Vue.js, all these new front-end frameworks, people are realizing that like functional actually makes a lot of sense for the front end, and not necessarily like purely functional. Like people aren't trying to bring Haskell to the front end, but they're trying to use JavaScript in a much more functional way because it offers a lot of benefits. And that's kind of what I want to teach, or at least give an introduction to in this course, because I think it will be a huge shift. It will continue to shift over the next 10 years, and we'll continue to see just more of this. And so I think it's important for people to at least be prepared for what's coming in the future and know why it's useful and when it's useful. Because realistically, it's really hard to be 100% functional. It's just not practical. OO is just easier and better in some cases, but like it's also important to know that there are certain use cases where functional programming does make things better, for front end specifically, where there's a lot of state and all that. And yeah, that's the reason why I chose functional programming.
Well, how's the course going so far? You're doing it
Doing really
completely
well.
through emails?
Yeah, all email. So it's a 10 lessons in total, and they go out one lesson, and then right after the lesson you get like a 5 to 6 question quiz. And the quiz is optional, obviously, but I recommend that you take it just so you can remember some of the concepts you learned. And it's completely free. It's all in email. You get everything in your inbox, and all you have to do is like read it. So I would say it probably takes you like at most 5 minutes a day to read one of those emails, and you learn. By the end of it, you get like the basically the core tenets of functional programming. That's the goal. The core, so that you have a solid foundation of like all these different terms or principles that you might have heard of in the wild, like purity, immutability, referential transparency, like with examples as well, and like caveats. And then the goal is, I'm also creating a more full-length video series at the end of the year. And I want people to use this course as like a foundation to see if this is something interesting to them and if they want to go deeper in this area, so that when I actually create the full course, you'd be more inclined and prepared to sign up for that, which will go into much more like in-depth on each of these topics, as well as practical applications, built using these practical front-end applications using these topics.
Yeah, and you have written an excellent article that has kind of a quick primer for functional programming built into it, that you use to announce.
Yeah.
And just so everybody knows, I've included a link to that down below in the description. So click through, check out that article, and sign up for Preethi's course. It's like she said, it's completely free. It's not a huge time commitment, and it just comes right to your inbox. So you don't even have to remember to go do it. You're going to get a notification every day in the form of an email, and that notification will double as the content. And then are you using like Google Forms or something like that for the quizzes?
Typeform.
Typeform. Oh, awesome.
The beautiful quiz maker, yeah.
So one of the things you've really emphasized, and you wrote this really important article last year that was very popular, and it got passed around in a lot of development circles, which was learning how to learn. And you talk about how learning how to learn is the most important developer skill. What brought you to that conclusion?
I think, okay, so first of all, I'm passionate about learning in general, because I think one of the things that really bothers me is that no one teaches you how to learn. When you're in grade school, when you're in kindergarten, like they teach you, but no one teaches you how to learn. Everyone kind of finds their own way, and that way could be efficient for you, or that way might not be the best way to study. And this is a problem I deeply care about, and something I really want to solve. And with that's kind of what I want to do when I go out and build my product. And so I realize that that same thing applies to programming. Like people don't really teach you the importance of like the fact that learning as a skill set is a skill set itself. Like it's important to know how to learn because things are constantly changing, and if you don't know how to learn, you're just gonna fall behind. And it's not like you have to spend 30 hours a week learning new stuff. It's a skill set that you gain, and learning new things becomes easier and easier and easier. It's just that you need to gain that skill set. And I realized this because when I first started programming, certain things would take me hours to learn. And then over time, it would take me like maybe a few hours. And then over time, I can get to a point where right now, if I want to learn a technology, I can just skim through the docs for like a few minutes and get a gist of it. Like I can skim through API docs for literally 2 minutes and get the gist of what I need from it. And it's because I've built up the skill on how to learn. And I think that's such an important part of being a developer, because we're continuously like people shove new and new technologies at us, and you have to keep up with all this stuff. And if you don't know how to learn, then you're going to quickly get overwhelmed, I think.
For everyone who's watching who is interested in learning how to learn more effectively, is there like a single tip, like low-hanging fruit, where they could go out and immediately start applying it and learn a little bit quicker as a result?
That's interesting. Repetition. So there's no, it's I think especially for programming, it's repetition and like actually sitting there and doing what you're learning. Don't expect to learn by just reading a bunch of books and understanding code, because that feels like you're actually learning, but not that you're. It's often the case that when you actually have to go code something that you read, you won't know how to code it really, or you'll get really stuck up on something. So I would say, particularly with programming, it's like repetition until the concepts sink in, and even if you don't get it the first time, just keep going. Like even if it'll always feel blurry at first, like you're just kind of like you're just trying to get something to work, and that's totally fine if you don't understand how it works, but you got it to work. Then go back and be like, how did this actually work? And then actually understand it. And it's almost 100% the case that if you actually understand what you just learned really well, then that will also apply to something else that you learn in the future, and it becomes easy. That's how this knowledge builds up. It just becomes easier because you're incrementally building this knowledge up, if you're actually taking time to deeply understand everything that you're learning. And then the next thing becomes easier to learn, and the next thing becomes easier to learn. At least that's been my experience.
So kind of leveraging the associative power of the human brain, and just the more things you have in your mind, the more relations you can build.
Yeah, like focus on just learning one thing at a time, and don't focus on knowing everything. And then over time, it will automatically build up. You don't even have to think about it. I think like just pick something and learn it to its until you get to the end. Get to the end. Don't get discouraged. Don't try something else because someone else told you that's better. It's like get to the end on a few things, and you'll see that the snowball starts to form. But it's important to just like stick to one thing for a long time until you actually understand it and learn it.
And it sounds like with your adventures into Python and to data science and things like that, that one thing that you really stuck to was JavaScript.
Yeah, so exactly, like I did really try Python. I did really try data science, but they didn't work out. But JavaScript, something about it clicked, and I'm not going to give it up because it just feels right. And I know there's other languages out there that are probably better, or or more suited for certain things. But I think it's important that it doesn't matter what language I pick. It's just important that I get really, really good at it. Because that's just how it works. Like, it doesn't really matter what you do. It just matters like how well you actually do it.
Yeah. So on the note of just mastering a specific thing, you're going extremely deep into JavaScript. You're writing this functional programming course. Are there any other projects that are on the near horizon after you finish this functional programming video series?
Yeah, I feel like the video series is going to take up a lot of my time this year because I'm still in the outlining phase. Once that's done, I want to see how that goes. I want to see the reception from the community. I'm becoming very passionate about functional programming, so if I'm still passionate about it by the end of the year after finishing this series, I'll probably continue in that route. And honestly, if the audience is receptive to it, if not, honestly, who knows? Things change so much in a year as a developer. Your interests are kind of like, I think I only take it at like 2 to 3 months at a time, because sometimes you think you might be interested in something, but you get somewhat deep and you're like, oh, okay, maybe I want to take a slightly different angle, and so you make a slight turn, and so you kind of just like taking the path as you go. So I don't know what I'll do like next year, but I mean, in a year and a half, I've come a long way. So a year from now feels like eternity.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Preethi. Thank you, everybody from our live audience, for tuning in. I've put links to several of Preethi's most important articles below, including her announcement of her functional programming email course. So I strongly recommend everybody check that one out, especially, and sign up for it. And of course, I strongly recommend you follow her on Twitter. She has some amazing, insightful tweets, and I enjoy reading them as they come in. And thank you again for joining us.
Thank you, Quincy.
Have a beautiful day.
You too.
Cheers, everyone.